All right, settle in, everyone, for a deep dive into a movie that's stirring things up. It's called The Holdovers. You might be thinking, not another holiday movie, come on. But stick with me here. This one comes from Alexander Payne, the director who brought us Sideways. And let me tell you, it is not your typical holiday flick, not at all. Picture this. It's Christmas break back in the 1970s, and we've got a grumpy teacher, a rebellious student, and then you throw in a grieving cook, all stuck at this, like, prestigious New England prep school. You know the type. Doesn't sound like your average Hallmark movie, right?
It's really interesting how this film turns those holiday movie cliches completely upside down. Instead of all that focus on perfect families and all that cheery stuff, it zeroes in on these characters who each find a kind of comfort in the fact they're all out of place. You know what I mean? It's heartwarming. Oh, definitely. But not in that sappy way you might be expecting.
Right. Definitely not the typical holiday movie formula. So, okay, let's talk about these characters a bit, shall we? We've got Paul Giamatti. He's playing the, let's say, curmudgeonly teacher, Paul Hunham. Now, Giamatti's brilliant at playing these complex characters. We all know that. But with this one, critics are saying he's just taken it to a whole other level.
He really has. It's just incredible the depth he brings to this role. He's not just some, grumpy old teacher. He's so much more than that. This is a man who's wrestling with his past, with his own demons, and he's searching for connection, even if he's, kind of clueless about how to do it. There's this one scene, it just kills me, where he's looking at this old photo of his former students, and for a second you just see this flicker of regret, like a longing for something he's lost. It's so subtle, but it packs a punch,
It's those tiny details that make a performance, for sure. And to make things even more interesting, he's got this newcomer, Dominic Sessa. Playing opposite him is Angus Tully, the rebellious student. Talk about jumping into the deep end. Imagine making your film debut with Paul Giamatti.
Oh, absolutely. It's that classic mentor-mentee dynamic. And what's amazing is Sessa doesn't just try to keep up. He brings this raw energy. It's amazing to watch. His character, Angus, you can tell he's smart but troubled too, pushing everyone's buttons. It makes those scenes between them just crackle with energy.
Oh, I can only imagine. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we have divine Joy Randolph playing Mary Lamb. She's the head cook at the school. And get this, she's dealing with the loss of her son. He was killed in Vietnam. It's just, it's heavy stuff. Not your usual holiday fare at all.
Oh. You're telling me, but Randolph's performance it's truly moving, really something. She brings so much nuance to the role, this mix of grief and resilience. It's not just, here's the character you feel sorry for. She's way more than that. Mary becomes, the heart of the group in a way. You feel like she's been through hell and back, but she still finds a way to keep going, to find those little moments of joy, of connection. It's inspiring, really.
It really makes you think about how we all experience the holidays differently. For some, it's all family and happiness and all that, but for others, it's tougher. A time to be alone, to think about things. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. Like you were the odd one out during the holidays. I know I have sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why these characters hit home. They're all outsiders, each dealing with their own stuff beneath the surface. And it's in that shared feeling, that sense of not belonging, that they find each other. It's kind of beautiful.
It is. And I think Alexander Payne, the director, he's digging into some deeper themes here. He's got a knack for these character-driven stories. Sideways is a great example. But this one feels different, like he's going even further.
Well, what's so interesting is how he uses humor. It's not slapstick or anything, but there's this sharp wit, this way of observing people that makes you smile, even when you're feeling for these characters and their struggles,
It's a tough balance to strike humor and sadness like that.
Totally. And some people might find it a little too, melancholic for a holiday film. But honestly, I think that's what makes it so powerful. It doesn't shy away from the harder parts of the holidays, the loneliness and grief. So many people feel that. It reminds us that picture-perfect holidays, they're not always the reality.
It's like the film is holding up a mirror, showing us the other side of the holidays.
Exactly. And I think that's one of its strengths. It gets us talking honestly about this time of year, about all those expectations we put on ourselves, on each other, and about those unexpected moments of connection, of finding meaning, even when things are tough.
So we've got these layered characters, this intriguing setting, and a director who knows how to tell a story. But what I'm really curious about is, how does the film actually look and feel? I've heard it's got this unique style, very 1970s, and that the pacing is, deliberate, not rushed.
You're right on the money there, and that's something we definitely need to explore further, because the visuals, the pacing, they're just as important as the characters, the story, in terms of, how the film affects you, how it all comes together.
You've got my attention. I'm ready to hear more about all that. How those things contribute to the mood, the atmosphere of the whole film.
Oh, it's visually stunning. Really just beautiful to look at. It's shot in this grainy, sort of muted style that honestly takes you right back to the 70s, like those faded Kodachrome colors, lots of browns and yellows. It's very specific.
So it's not just set in the 70s. It's like they actually made the film back then.
That's the idea. And it works on a few levels. There's the nostalgia factor, of course. That's obvious. But it also creates this sense of distance, like you're watching an old memory, which, when you think about the themes, the reflection, and looking inward, it all ties in perfectly.
You mentioned the pacing earlier, said it was deliberate, which, I don't know, some viewers, I think, might struggle with that a bit. I mean, we're so used to things happening fast, instant gratification and all that.
Oh, for sure. But here's the thing with the Holdovers. That deliberate pacing, that's really where its power lies. Those long takes, the quiet moments, the ones where not much seems to be happening, they let you really sink into the characters, their emotional states, you get me. You feel their boredom, their loneliness, that feeling of when you're stuck somewhere you don't want to be, how time just drags on.
It's like the movie itself becomes a holdover, too. Just like the characters kind of mirroring their experience. You're forced to slow down, to really pay attention, just like them.
Precisely. And that's where the setting plays such a key role. The film uses the school, this sort of austere beauty, so well. Those snow-covered grounds, empty classrooms, long hallways with all of echoes. It all adds to that feeling of isolation, of being trapped, not just physically, but emotionally, too.
It's funny you said austere beauty. It doesn't exactly scream holiday movie, does it?
Right. Not exactly all warm and fuzzy fireplaces and hot cocoa, is it? But that's what sets the Holdovers apart. It flips the script, Challenges what we think a holiday film should be, makes us confront the fact that the holidays, they're not always happy times for everyone.
Yeah, it's getting real with us. Showing that undercurrent of melancholy, it's definitely there.
And it does it all with these incredible performances, like we talked about Giamatti. But let's dive a little deeper into how he plays Paul Hunham. There's this scene where he has to call his students' parents to give them bad news, and you see the weight of the world on him. He's carrying so much guilt, regret, this feeling of inadequacy. It's all there, just beneath the surface.
You were saying earlier how he's searching for connection, but doesn't really know how.
Right, and it comes through in his performance so clearly. It's amazing. And then Dominic Sessa, as Angus, he's fantastic too. What struck me is how he captures that teenage thing, that mix of arrogance and vulnerability. Angus acts out, pushes everyone away, but you can tell he just wants someone. To see him, to get him,
So it's more than just a teacher-student relationship. There's something deeper going on there.
Definitely. It's messy, it's unpredictable, but underneath it all, there's this respect that builds between them slowly. It's subtle, but it's there. And Divine Joy Randolph as Mary, oh my gosh, she's just phenomenal.
Everyone seems to be saying that. What is it about her performance that grabs you?
It's the warmth she brings and this wisdom, Mary's been through so much loss, but she doesn't let it define her. She finds ways to connect with people, to nurture them, even to find humor, even in the darkest times. She becomes this unexpected source of strength for both Paul and Angus.
So even in this setting, which feels so, stark, isolated, they still manage to connect, to find each other.
Exactly, and that's what's so moving about the Holdovers. It's a reminder that even when you feel lost, alone, there's always that potential for connection, to be surprised by it, to find healing, to find your way back to yourself.
It sounds like Alexander Payne has really hit it out of the park with this one. More than just a film, it's an experience. Makes me think about my own holidays, all those unexpected connections I've made over the years.
And that's the power of film, right? It takes you places, challenges you, makes you feel things unexpectedly. It sounds like Payne has achieved something really special here with the Holdovers.
It's got me intrigued, that's for sure. But before we move on, I want to go back to something you touched on earlier.
Okay.
That some viewers might find it too, melancholic for a holiday film.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't sugarcoat things. It shows the darker side of the holidays. But that's also what makes it so relatable, I think, because the holidays aren't always happy for everyone. It can be a time of loneliness, of grief, of facing tough memories. It's real.
So is the Holdovers too melancholic for a holiday film? Or is it that honesty, that realness that makes it more relatable and in the end more rewarding to watch?
Yeah.
I guess that's up to each viewer to decide.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of this whole deep dive thing we're doing. We're not here to tell you what to think, thumbs up or down. It's not about that. It's about exploring, unpacking the themes, starting a conversation, What speaks to you? What makes you uncomfortable? Those are the questions we're thinking about as you watch the film, as you experience it for yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
But before we send everyone off to ponder all that, I've got one more for you. The film, it's clearly drawing on the 1970s. For the look, the feel, even the tone. What is it about that era that still fascinates us so much? You see it everywhere. Fashion, music, even TV shows. It's like everyone's obsessed with that 70s vibe.
That's a great question, and there's a lot to unpack there, I think. First off, you got to consider nostalgia. It works in cycles. Each generation tends to romanticize a certain era, and right now the 70s are having a moment. Maybe it's a reaction to this hyper-digital world we live in now.
Like we're yearning for a time before smartphones and social media, a simpler time maybe.
Maybe, yeah. The 70s had this rawness, this unfiltered quality, both visually and culturally. Think about that grainy film stock, the color palettes, the music. It was all a bit more, raw.
It's ironic, in the film, the characters are literally stuck, can't go home for the holidays.
Okay.
And maybe we feel a bit stuck too, in our own time. And looking back at the 70s, maybe we see a time when things felt freer, less restricted, I don't know.
There's that, and also you can't ignore the cultural shifts that were happening then. The 70s was a time of social upheaval, activism, challenging the status quo.
Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it?
Right. It's like we're looking back for guidance, for inspiration on how to handle our own uncertain times.
And maybe there's a bit of escapism mixed in there too, let's be honest.
Yeah.
The 70s, it had this cool factor, a sense of rebellion, of doing your own thing. Bell-bottoms, platform shoes, those big 70s hairstyles, it all had an attitude.
Absolutely. Fashion was bold, music was experimental. There was this feeling that anything was possible. So yeah, it makes sense that we'd find those elements appealing now. Our times can feel a bit, the 70s had a swagger, a confidence that maybe we're missing a little these days.
So it's this mix of nostalgia, wanting something real, being fascinated by a time of change.
Yeah.
And yeah, a bit of wanting to be cool, let's be real. And the Holdovers, by tapping into that 70s aesthetic, it's playing with all of that.
And doing it in a way that feels, genuine. It's not just surface level. Those visual cues, they add to the emotional depth of the story. They're not just there for show.
It's like the film is saying, hey, remember this feeling, this time when things felt different.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also making us see the parallels between then and now, how history can repeat itself, and how maybe we can learn something from looking back.
Exactly. That's what makes The Holdovers more than just a movie. It's a starting point for a conversation. It asks us to think about how we relate to the past, to nostalgia, and how all that shapes us today.
So if you're looking for a film that'll take you back in time, but also make you think about now, about how complex everything is, The Holdovers is definitely worth checking out. It embraces the bittersweet side of nostalgia, those unexpected connections we make, and that basic human need to find meaning, to find purpose, even when things are tough.
And as you watch it, you might find yourself reflecting on more than just the characters. Maybe you'll start thinking about your own life. What are you holding on to from the past? What connections have surprised you? What brings you meaning, even when things are hard? These are the kinds of questions that The Holdovers makes you think about.
I love that it's been a really interesting deep dive into The Holdovers, that's for sure. We've covered the characters, the setting, all the themes, even how the 1970s play into it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing, I think, is that we've had a conversation, and that's what we hope our listeners will do too.
Go see the film. Talk about it with your friends. Let it spark your own deep dive into what matters to you. Because in the end, the best journeys, the most meaningful ones, we take those together.
Beautifully put. And on that note, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.
So we've talked about how The Holdovers isn't your typical holiday film, right? Complex characters, interesting setting, and that pacing, it really gets you to feel how isolated they are. But there's also that 70s vibe. It's everywhere. What is it about that era that still gets to us? You see it everywhere now. Fashion, music, even TV shows. Like everyone's obsessed with that 70s look and feel.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think there are a few things going on. For one, nostalgia, it goes in cycles. Every generation kind of romanticizes a certain time. And now it seems like it's the 70s turn.
Like we miss a time before we were all glued to our phones, to social media. A simpler time, maybe.
Could be, yeah. The 70s had this rawness, this unfiltered feel to it, visually, culturally. Think about it. That grainy film, the colors, the music, it was all less polished, more real somehow. It's weird, right? In the film, they're literally stuck, can't go home for the holidays. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we feel a bit stuck too in our own time. Like looking back at the 70s, it was a time when things felt, I don't know, freer, more open maybe.
There's that, for sure. And you also have to think about all the changes that were happening back then. The 70s, it was a time of big social shifts, activism, people questioning everything.
Sounds kind of familiar, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like we're looking back for some kind of guidance, some inspiration, to figure out how to handle the uncertainty in our own time.
And maybe a little bit of just wanting to escape, to be honest. The 70s had this coolness, like a rebellious spirit, an individuality, bell-bottoms, platform shoes, that hair. It was all about making a statement.
Totally. Fashion was bold, music was pushing boundaries, there was this sense of possibility, like anything could happen. So it makes sense we'd be drawn to that now when things can feel a bit, well, let's just say the 70s had a confidence that we might be missing these days.
So it's this whole mix of nostalgia, wanting something real, being drawn to a time of big change, and yeah, let's be honest, a bit of wanting to be cool. And the Holdovers, by using that 70s aesthetic, it's tapping into all of that.
And it does it in a way that feels genuine, not like it's just trying to be trendy. Those visual cues, they actually add to the emotional impact. They're not just there for looks.
It's like the film saying, hey, remember this feeling, this time. But it's also showing us how things connect, how history kind of repeats itself, and maybe how we can learn from looking back.
Exactly. That's what makes The Holdovers more than just a film. It gets people talking, thinking. It makes you consider your own relationship with the past, with nostalgia, and how all that shapes who you are now.
So if you're looking for a film that takes you back in time, but also makes you think about right now, about all the complicated stuff we're dealing with, The Holdovers is worth seeing, for sure. It's about that bittersweet feeling of nostalgia, about those connections that surprise you, and that human need to find meaning, even when things are tough.
And maybe as you watch it, you'll think about more than just the characters, What are you holding on to from your past? What connections have surprised you? What makes your life feel meaningful, even when it's hard? These are the kind of questions The Holdovers makes you ask yourself.
So well put. It's been a fascinating deep dive into The Holdovers. We've talked about everything, the characters, the setting, the themes, even how the 70s plays into it all. But more than anything, we've had a conversation, and that's what we hope you'll do too.
Go see it. Talk about it. Let it get you thinking. Let it be the start of your own deep dive into the stuff that matters to you. Because ultimately, the best journeys, the ones that really mean something, those are the ones we take together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.